Hello, everyone. I hope that you're doing well. I'm just stopping by to do my final review on the CSEC biology paper. I'm very sorry that I didn't get the chance to do a live, but hopefully in the future I will do so. And I also want to encourage you that there's no need to be frustrated. Please do not fluster as well. All you need to do is to drink enough water, get some rest, and please think clearly, have a clear mind going to the examination. You have been reviewing and studying, so I'm sure that you remember a lot of stuff. And in fact, my prayers are with you as well. And so this paper is, as I mentioned, is a biology paper. It's a paper 2, in fact, and it's from January 2023. All right, so let me just quickly jump through, and I want to go through as quickly as possible. But before I go through it, remember to read through the instructions. And if you have any questions or queries, please clarify them with the examiner. All right, and for section A, number 1, part A, it said write a balanced chemical equation to summarize the process of aerobic respiration. And so for aerobic respiration, you're going to have glucose, which is C6H12O6, plus 6O2, which is oxygen, and then that will produce 6 molecules of carbon dioxide with 6 molecules of water and energy. The energy will be in ATP, and there will be 2,880 kilojoules of energy as well. And for part B, it's a list 2 characteristics of gaseous exchange surfaces in mammals. And this is pretty much a repeat question from the last paper I did. And so here we're going to have it being thin, moist, permeable, large surface area, and covered with many capillaries. All right. And this is describing the alveoli. All right. And so for part C, it says suggest 3 ways in which respiration differs from breathing. And so respiration is a chemical process. In fact, it's a biochemical process. It also produces energy, uses enzymes, and it is intracellular. While on the opposite end, for breathing, opposing chemical is mechanical. While respiration is producing energy, breathing is using energy. But a point of clarification though, for respiration to start, energy is required. But the major function of respiration is to produce energy. But to breathe, you require energy for all those movements of the muscles and so on. All right, and breathing, there's no need for enzymes. Breathing is also extracellular, which is outside of the cell, opposed to respiration, which takes place within the cell. All right, and so going into part D, and this part states that figure 1 shows the apparatus setup used to demonstrate a process. You have a glass tube, you have balloons, you have bell jar, and you have rubber sheet. All right, so please try to keep up. I'm trying to go as fast as I possibly can. And so name the process being demonstrated in figure 1, and that is breathing. And it said name the structures in humans that are represented by the following labels on the apparatus. And so the glass tubes, you can always go back to the diagram. For the glass tube, which is the vertical section, that is the trachea. The balloons will be the lungs. The bell jar will be the rib cage. And the rubber sheath will be the diaphragm. All right, and so in this section 3, is a suggest 2 reasons why a glass bell jar was used instead of a plastic bag in setting up the experiment. And of course, a plastic bag is very, very soft, thin, and all of that, right? So one major thing is that the bell jar is more rigid and stronger, and it's similar in terms of mimicking the rib cage. And second reason is that it will not burst due to increased pressure when the balloons are inflated. And it will also not collapse as well. So there should be also a third one. It should not be collapsed. All right, I have it here. It will not collapse when the balloons are deflated. Because of course, when the balloons get smaller, if there's a plastic bag, the plastic bag will collapse, and that should not happen. A point to note here that it will not change. The bell jar will not change when the pressure in the balloons change. All right, so that is the major reason explained by the second and third points. Now for part 4, it state 2 consequences of a puncture in the human structure that is represented by the rubber sheet. And so for the rubber sheet, which represents a diaphragm, and so we're talking about a ruptured diaphragm, and one is that you'd have a drop in internal pressure in the lungs, because remember the diaphragm will push up and increase the pressure, and so you can expel air by exhalation. And so it'll be difficult to exhale air. You may experience coughing and shortness of breath due to the backup of carbon dioxide in the lungs as well. Bloating may take place in the abdominal cavity area. and of course because the pressure of the lungs may push down onto that area, causing increased pressure on the abdominal cavity. Again, this is just a little extra point if you should have more points. And pain during breathing, difficulty in breathing. All right, and just in case if they ask about the effect on the balloons itself, if they were referring to the apparatus and not the human body, then difficulty in inflating and deflating the balloons. So that would be the effect on the apparatus. But they did not ask that, but just in case. All right, so for part 5, it said during the experiment, a student pulls the rubber sheet downwards, state the expected observation. And if she pulls down on the rubber sheet, then what will happen is that the pressure inside of the balloons will decrease, and so the balloons will be filled with air or otherwise inflated. All right, and part 6 actually is state that give 2 reasons for the expected observation stated in 5. And so one is that the pressure against the balloons drop, and because of that now the volume in the bell jar also increased, causing more air to enter the balloons. All right. And so let's go into part E. It's a list 3 precautions that should be taken when setting up the apparatus in figure 1 on page 5. And so one, you're going to make sure to seal the jar tightly to prevent air from entering, because air should only enter through the glass tube, which represents the trachea. Also, the balloons should be fastened securely onto the glass tubes. Again, you should empty the balloons of air before attaching them to the glass tube as well. And fourth point is that the rubber sheet must be flexible. And being flexible means that it's able to return to its original position. Able to return to its original position or state if pulled or stretched. And the fifth one is that the glass tube must not be too large or too small. If it's too large, then air will rush into the balloon quickly, and also air will expel from the balloon as you push it down. So it's going to be hard to contain the air in the balloon. All right, so the observation will be hard to detect. All right, so let's go into, now we finished with question number 1. Question number 2 now. And question number 2 said define the terms effector and receptor and give one example of each. And so an effector is any cell or part of a body that responds to stimuli. An example in the muscle, because in fact that's what is carrying out the movement or triggers the movement of the muscle. All right, and so we have receptor. And receptor is really a cell or part of a body that detects and also receives stimuli. An example would be rods and cones, taste buds, organ of corti. An organ of corti will be found or can be found in the cochlea in the ear. All right, and so they are the vibration detectors. Now for part B, it's a name the specialized cell found in the nervous system, and so they're all nerve cells or neurons. And so specific example would be motor neuron, sensory neuron, and relay neuron. Now ask us to define the term stimulus, and a stimulus is a change in the environment that the body can detect and respond to. All right, an example of a stimulus would be like temperature, pressure, pain, touch, and so on. Light, water. So anything that changes the environment that the body reacts to, then yes, it is a stimulus. Now part D is explain how the response to a named stimulus is important for the survival of each of the following organisms. And so earthworm, a major one is light or heat, and the response is a negative phototaxis response, and which means that the earthworm will move away from the light, so it move away from the stimulus. All right, so anything regard to that, yeah, it should be all right. How responses aid survival, and what it does generally is to prevent dehydration, and so the earthworm may move to darker areas, typically in the soil or on the probably debris, especially decaying debris that are moist, and so they find moisture there, and also it also enables them to move away from predators as well, because if they're in the open in the light, they can be seen easily and be eaten. All right, and for green plants, there are many stimuli here, and so the one in blue is one I'm focusing on, which is light. So we have light, we have water, we have gravity, we have chemicals, which are minerals. All right, and even touch for plants, certain plants, which is thigmotropism. And so response will be the plant will grow towards the light, or I can say growth towards light. And this is termed as positively phototropic response. And how the response aid in survival is that if a plant move towards light, then it will get enough light to make food. So it's general for food production. As a plant shoot grows towards the light to obtain maximum sunlight, ensuring optimum food production. If you mention the roots, then roots will go away from the light, which is down into the soil, and going down in the soil will provide anchorage and also finding minerals and also water. All right. For water go towards water, get water for food production as well. Gravity roots go down, shoot go against gravity. So once you know all about the different trophic responses, then able to explain this question. All right, so let's move on with this. Again, I really want to finish in time. Hopefully, I catch at least some of you. All right, so for question number 3, it said an ecologist identified 2 species with identical niches in an ecosystem. Define the term species. And a species refer to a group of organisms that can be interbreed to produce viable offspring, which means those offspring can also produce offspring as well. All right, for part 2, it suggests 2 possible outcomes if 2 species compete for the same resources. And if 2 species are competing for the same resources, then one may die due to starvation. And that is leading up to natural selection as well. So the fittest of the fittest will survive. Another thing you can also mention is that population decrease in one of the species or both of them. Also, you can have migration of one of the species if it's unable to find food or use the resources effectively. Another thing that may happen here, which is negative, is that you may have slow growth, slow development, or unable to reproduce effectively because of lack of nutrients, all right, or the available resource, depending on what the resource is. All right, and so for part B, it said that the ecologist observed a food chain which consists of a plant, a mouse, and a cockroach and a bird. And it's based on the feeding relationship observed. The organisms were described as herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. And so define the following terms. And so a carnivore is organisms that eat meat or other animals. And omnivores, now, they eat both plants and animals. All right. And herbivores eat only plants. All right. And it's a draw a food chain with the 4 organisms listed. And so the plant will be first, the cockroach, the mouse, and the bird. But I must point this out though. The mouse could also come after the bird. The bird could come before, depending on the type of bird. All right, but we just assume that the bird is a large bird compared to the mouse. And so, yeah, the bird will be eating the mouse. All right. Again, depending on the size of a bird. Didn't specify, so I just go that order. Now for part 3, so identify the herbivore and carnivore from the food chain. And so the herbivore is a cockroach eating the plant, and the carnivore could either be the bird or the mouse. And a point to note is that a food chain does not show omnivores because a food chain only shows one feed source or one directional flow of energy. All right. And now for part C, so figure 2 shows how the population density of rabbits and wolves change in a population. And here, if you notice, just observe the graph. When rabbit is high, wolf is low, because the wolf is a predator, of course, and rabbit is a prey. All right. And of course, when the rabbit is low, the predator start to get in low as well, all right, because they have less food. All right. So here's to explain the changes in the population density of the rabbits and wolves with time. And so what you're going to do is to describe a predator-prey relationship. All right. And so we're going to discuss around that line. And a point to note is that when the wolves population is low, the population of rabbit increases because they have less predator to feed on them. And so when the wolves population increases, the population of rabbit decreases, which means you have more predator feeding on the rabbits. And a point to note, this piece in red, it states that when rabbits is high, the wolves have more food, right? And so the wolf now population will start to increase. Then, as a result of this increase, eventually the rabbit population will start to decline. All right. And once the population of rabbits start declining, then the whole population will also start to decline as well. All right. All right. Next part of the question here, matter of fact, section B. All right. I'm moving rapidly. All right. So, number 4, it says state the name of 2 processes by which organisms reproduce asexually. For each process, provide one example of an organism which reproduces in this way. And so budding would be for hydra, binary fission would be for bacteria, Spore production would be example for fern. Vegetative reproduction would be plants, and not all plants, but some plants such as potatoes and so on. All right, sugar cane. Fragmentation is seen in planaria. All right, and for part B, it's a asexual reproduction is not suitable for organisms which live in environment that changes often. Explain one reason to support this statement. And a point to note is that offspring are genetically the same as their parents, so there's no variation. So right, you're going to have low rate of adaptation. All right, and so what's going to happen here is that the organism will be easily extinct because organisms are unable to adapt and evolve. All right, because they're all the same, then there's no means to produce variation among the species, and so hence what affects one affects all. And so once the environments keep changing, then adaptation will be really, really, really low. And that's a major effect on these organisms. All right, so let's talk about part C now. So define the following terms. Genes. A gene is a segment of a DNA that is responsible for a specific trait in a given species, and it is also responsible to transmit genetic information from parents to offspring. All right, an allele now is an alternate form of a gene that can be either dominant or recessive. So you have dominant allele, recessive allele, not dominant genes, not recessive genes. Just please remember that. All right, now for part D1, it's attached earlobes is a recessive trait, and it is not sex-linked, which means it's autosomal. It's not an X or Y chromosome, right? So Mary has attached earlobes like one of her parents, and remember this is recessive, attaches recessive, and so her other parent has 3 earlobes. Using a genetic diagram, show the cross between Mary's parents. And so point to note, you need to put the allele. So allele will be uppercase E for 3 earlobes because that will be dominant, and small e for attached earlobes. Again, you can put H as well if you want. Doesn't matter what letter you use really, once it's appropriate. The genotype for one of the parent will be 2 lowercase e's because that person will be attached, just as Mary. And parent 2 has to be an heterozygous person because the only way Mary could be attached earlobe is that she must also get a recessive allele from the second parent. All right, and if the parent is free earlobe, then it must have at least one of the dominant allele. All right, so that's how we know that parent is heterozygous. So the result is shown in the chart. And so the part 2 is a state Mary's genotype, and Mary's genotype, since she's attached, must be 2 lowercase e's. All right, and for part 3 is a based on the results of the cross in D1, state the probability of a child having attached earlobe. And so based on the chart, you notice that 2 out of 4 will be attached. The 2 at the bottoms will be attached. So there's a 50% chance of having attached earlobe. So Mary was a part of that probability. All right, so part number 5. Oh, yes. All right, the question number 5 is a state 2 functions of the human skeleton. And the human skeleton aids in a number of things. 1, it aids in movement, aids with the shape and support of the body. As well, it also aids in protecting the internal organs. Also produces blood cells, store minerals, particularly calcium. All right, so that's an easy, well, that's 2 marks. All right, and so here now, this part of question is the figure 3 diagram of a flex arm of a human being, and it's a name the 2 muscles labeled X and Y, and of course we know that X is the bicep and Y is the tricep. All right, and so we are on to part C. It's a teenager received an injury while participating in a sporting event. The injury resulted in damage to the joint in the knee. However, the teenager did not experience any damage to the joint in the hip. All right, so part 1 is to name the type of joint. Joints, a matter of fact, found in each of the following. And so knee will be hinge joint, and hip will be ball and socket joint. And for part 2 is to explain one way in which the function of the knee and hip joint are similar, and one way in which the function of the knee joint differs from the hip joint. And so the similarity between both is that they are free moving joints. We call them synovial joints. All right, so they are movable joints. All right, so you have free movement taking place at those 2 joints. And so the difference between them is that the hinge joint provides motion in one direction, while the ball and socket provides motion in more than one direction. So I'm just put down my S right here. All right, so yep. All right, so that's it for that question. 3 marks easily. All right, for part D, it's an animal was hit accidentally by a car on the road. It suffered a broken leg, but managed to limp to the side of the road. It suggests 4 ways in which the animal may be affected by the broken limb. And so, like any organism in any ecosystem, if you are not fit enough, then a number of things may happen to you. One is that you may be easily captured by predator, or predators, depending. And 2, unable to find food or reach food, in fact, and so may lead to starvation, unable to reproduce because now you're incapable in finding a mate or incapable of doing the action that will bring about reproduction. And so also it may develop some form of infection or diseases, maybe slow in movement, and that one ties in with pretty much part 1 and option 1 and 2. Because if you're slow movement, then you're going to be easily captured and difficult in finding food. Also, you may be unable to protect itself, as well as hiding from predator, just as part 1 is mentioned. But this is different variation that you can use to kind of answer the question. Unable to protect self from the natural elements, such as sun or heat. All right, so those will be some of the things that the organism may be unable to do. All right, so let's slide down into part E now. And I said, John received a puppy and a plant for his birthday. After 1 year, John notices that his plant and puppy are both growing, but their growth patterns are somewhat different. Describe one way in which the growth of the plant differs from the growth of the puppy. And so one, just to make a note that plants generally will be vertical in terms of growth. Puppy will be both vertical and lateral growth. All right. Pretty much the plant will grow faster and more noticeable, because even slight change in plants will be noticeable more than the puppy itself. So the puppy growth will be much slower and less noticeable in a short time. All right, the plant will tend to be uneven because it can have branches going sideways and so on, but they tend to go up, but the branches will be different from the tip of the plant, right? And also is that the puppy will be pretty much even, which is growth will be technically all over. For the plant, it will be a continuous thing. However, the puppy will grow at a point of maturity. And the fifth one here that I have is that affected by the growth in the plant is affected by the environmental factors and nutrients as well. Environmental factors such as light. Okay, how the plant will grow depends on light, depends on nutrients. And for the puppy now, growth is affected by the nutrients and not the environment. All right, so next part of the question. Well, final question. All right, it suggests 2 methods other than the use of insecticides that a country could utilize to eradicate mosquitoes. For each method suggested, name the stage of the mosquito life cycle on which the method is effective. And I'm sure that I answered a question like this on a past paper. I can't remember which year was it, but there was a question just like this. All right, so number 1 we have is biological control. Example, use of bacteria. And bacteria could affect the larva stage. Eliminate habitat and empty can so on, and that will affect the larval stage. Sterilization techniques could affect the adult. They prevent them from reproducing. Introduction of predators, which is a biological control, similar to number 1. But in this case, if you have a direct predator rather than bacteria, which infect them, then the biological control in this case could affect all stage. So you could have things in the water that eat the larva, or you could have things in the air that eat the adult mosquito. You could also have traps as well, right? And that will generally affect the adult. All right, for part B, it's a list 2 diseases which would become prominent in a country which has a large mosquito population. And so some of these, again, is a repeat. So Zika virus, chikungunya virus, dengue, malaria. Those are the 4 common ones that you will generally see, especially in the Caribbean. All right, and Caribbean and South America. Now, for part C of this question, it's the results of a study on a mosquito-related disease are presented in figure 4 below. The figure shows both distribution of reported diseases cases and the proportion of severe cases. And notice the bars, they represent the distribution of cases, while the line graph represents the proportion of severe cases. And notice you have number of cases on the left and you have proportion of severe cases on the right. and the number of here is at the bottom. All right, and so here now it says state the trend in the number of mosquito-related disease cases between 2017 and 2019, and suggest 3 reasons for this. All right, now I think I've answered this question generally rather than specifying the years. I think that's what I've done. I just realized that they give a specific year right here. This is a result of moving too fast. So between 2017, I'm just going to talk about what is happening. 2017 and 2019. Let me just use a graph to kind of talk about it. So between 2017, what you notice in terms of the distribution of cases, there is an increase, a rapid increase, a matter of fact. So this is the actual answer. The answer I have there is a general explanation for the graphs. I will show you those as well. But in terms of explaining this, you have rapid increase here. Notice it moves from, in terms of even the distribution of cases was about like 5 million, right? Well, it's 500,000, and then it go all the way up to 3 million, all right? So that's a rapid increase. That's drastic. In terms of severe cases as well, the severe cases also rise. So both of them rise in terms of what is happening here. And again, what could happen here in terms of the distribution of the diseases is that you can have a lot of rainfall, for example, and rainfall will lead to catchment of water in different areas and increased reproduction in mosquitoes as well. You can also have improper disposal of garbage, and if you do not dispose garbage properly, then what may happen is that, again, it creates safe havens or habitat for mosquito reproduction and breeding. All right, so those would be some of the reasons and cause for this increase in cases and so on. Also, travel could also be another one, because person travel, get infected, come back, and then infect other persons as well. So there are a number of reasons that you could list right here. Again, the things I'm going to show you right now will just be the general trends. And so you could just pause and go through that. This is a general trend in terms of what is happening with the graph. But what I explained between 2007 2019, pretty much both of them increase, and there are a number of reasons why you could have increase in that. All right, I'm not going to do the correction now because of time. All right, again, just remember what I said. Now for part D, DDT, an insecticide, was used to kill the local mosquito population. Over time, with the continued use of DDT, the mosquito population continued to increase. State the name of a process other than reproduction which may have led to the increase in the mosquito population, and explain how this increase occurred despite the use of the DDT. Now, what I have here is pretty much 3 options. Well, 2 of them really, they're pretty much the same thing. So natural selection, you could have natural selection taking place, or evolution by natural selection, or simple just write adaptation. And so what you have here is environmental pressure, and due to variation, then the mosquito will adapt. All right, and so in terms of explanation, what I have here is simply saying that the insecticide, which is DDT, added to the environment, causes a change in the environment. And so once there's a change in the environment, this adds pressure to the survival mode of the mosquitoes. And due to the variation among the mosquitoes species, some mosquitoes are resistant to the DDT, while others are not. And so the mosquitoes now that are not resistant will die, and the ones that are resistant will reproduce and increase in numbers, and over time the population will be totally resistant to the DDT. All right, so once you explain adaptation by adaptation or natural selection, then you're good to go. All right, so this is it for us, and I wish you luck again, and please take care of your good self. Also, have a clear mind, drink enough water, relax, calm. There's no need to be frustrated, don't need to be flustered. Talk to you soon, and thank you for being here, and thank you for being great students. Thank you. Some of you have been awesome. You're commenting, and also just in case of any queries or correction, then yeah, comment as you've been doing, and I surely will answer as best as I possibly can. Thank you so much. Have a blessed one.